Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This is part 2. So in this part, we're going to talk about Oni and Tengu. Oni are said to be ogres and demons, and Tengu is said to be mountain spirits. And this is part of the greater kind of global system of Satanism. Remember, Set is a deity of foreigners who are foreign to the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order in terms of spiritually speaking. You know, they could be people in my family, it could be people who are around me right now, what have you. Right? So Set was said to be a relative of Horus, right? His uncle in some versions, his brother in some versions. They're not necessarily a stranger in terms of what you think of when you think of the word stranger. But they're foreign, they're spiritually foreign to the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. It's like if somebody's crazy and they've been living in a place a long time and they don't understand what's going on. So I'm more spiritually evolved than other people. So when it comes to understanding Oni and Tengu, I don't know all the history and all the details, and it's probably something that the white Jewish and LGBT elite twisted anyway. But I understand demons and people, and understand that there's a certain amount of documentation in regards to these subjects, in regards to a Set testifying against himself. By Set, I mean everybody outside the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, and that's basically everyone else on the planet right now. I'm the only one obeying God, and my parents are blameless because they brought me into the world, and that's it. But some people purposely cultivate demons, right? And notice that the demon is said to be a demon of chaotic power, raw and raw power, malicious power, right? And martial power, right? So their martial arts spirit is said to be chaotic, raw, and full of malice. So if you were talking to a serious martial artist who's well researched, who's cultivated a certain degree of mental development, and you were to say that martial arts has nothing to do with the Bible, they would not think very highly of you. They would think you're an idiot, right? Maybe you just don't know, maybe you're a little kid, but they would think that you're not very in the know. And remember, the tree of knowledge is knowledge of good and evil, right? So the yin yang tends to be a symbol of people who are evil, who pretend that they're part good, when God separated the dark from the night. So to some degree, these things are a martial art disagreement, but they're not, because they have to do with moral absolutes. For example, is killing people for no reason wrong? Yes. Is coming into some psychotic spirit and massacring people to continue the traditions of your ancestors wrong? Yes. But to some people, they would argue that it's not, and that it just magically is, and that there's a balance, and so on and so forth, and that they're on a mission for power, and so on and so forth. So, every other person that does martial arts on the planet right now, okay, is evil for all intents and purposes, and it isn't an evil spirit. Now, a demon is said to be a skilled performer, right? The word demon is a play on words for odd men, right? And what do they mean by odd? Odd relative to the Royal African Falcon Martial Order. Think about, Egypt and Pharaoh. Pharaoh without the lipstick, without the kind of effeminate look that you see in popular culture, without the makeup, what have you. A very serious mulatto person who can outmaneuver and outsmart everyone else. Okay, that is the point of reference for the closest thing to perfection in the human race. So when all the these other races caught wind of that, and they realized the implications of the Egyptians' arguments, the early Egyptians, right, pre-dynastic, first dynasty, a lot of them were angry. A lot of them were jealous. They filled up with tribalism and racial animosity and so on and so forth. And that's a part of what's going on here, right? Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language, right? Christ is a character in the story hid from Herod symbolically in Egypt, not in Rome, not in England, not in, Babylon, but in Egypt. That's key here. The Jews were captive in Egypt, okay? Joseph in Egypt, and so on and so forth. In Egypt are called, in the Bible, they're called the people of God. It says, Egypt, my people. I believe it's in Isaiah. So when it's talking about the scattered children of God, it's talking about the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order in Egypt. Because remember, Egyptians, like other nations, their empire stretched into the Middle East. Okay? Just like Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod founded Babylon, right? He stretched his Cushite empire into the Middle East. And the Egyptians stretched their Mizraim empire, their Egyptian empire, also into the Middle East. So when Moses learned the ways of the Egyptians, he learned the ways of the Egyptians relative to what little they understood at the time of the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Okay, because that was a later dynasty, right? Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, it was somewhere later. It's been a while since I've gone over the timelines. but that was like around Ramses the Great. Most people consider maybe 18th or 19th dynasty, and there was an intermediate period or two leading up to that. So there was a huge change of culture and social order, and that included the change of how the priesthoods taught about Horus, who is in his true form is Jesus, and Jesus in his true form is Horus, and they're both the Royal African Falcon top martial arts king. There's no other way to look at it, because this is the truth of the matter. That's why they don't want to debate me, because it's ridiculous. It's like if you see the top martial arts ever possible debating Harry Potter or a typical priest in church, who are you going to believe, right? Obviously you believe me, or you're like crazy.